I want to talk today about sampling on the loom, which is an important topic because I feel that experienced weavers just say sample on, you have to weave a sample, but that's all they really say. And when you are new to weaving or trying to expand your weaving toolbox, it's hard to know sometimes what exactly does that mean? How do you do it? How do you do it efficiently? How do you do it without wasting a lot of yarn? So I'm going to talk today about ways to sample on the loom and still get a project out of what you're doing. So you can see that I've got my loom completely warped up with those chains that had been intended for a different project, but then I ran out of yarn. And I corrected the problems with the color sequence, and you can see that this pattern is really striking. It's gorgeous. So there's a wide band of turquoise, and in the middle of it, there are alternating ends, wide bands of turquoise, silk, and wool, and in the middle of it, there are 8 alternating ends of tencel, and then this gray accent color, which on the actual deflected double weave scarf would form these cool kind of circles in the deflected double weave structure. Here, they are outlining a 16 end alternating bit of the tencel. So this is gorgeous fabric. And I am going to use this. I'm going to say it's a 4-yard warp just to be on the safe side, because I did lose, although it's probably closer, much closer to 4.5. I wound it for 4.5. I did lose a little bit when I added in that correction to my warp color order threading mistake. So I am going to use this fabric for something. I'm going to sample on it first, and then I'm going to use it to weave Lois Weaver's very stunning origami jacket. I have made this before. She designed it, as you can see, for a shaft loom or a rigid heddle loom, and it requires a 17-inch weaving width. Let's see. I'm looking here. It's about a 17-inch weaving width. Yes, and I'm actually going to weave it at 19 inches, which is going to give me an even longer jacket. Uh, when I made this before, I was very happy with the results, except that the yarn I used was just a little bit itchy on the back of my neck. So now in silk and wool and tencel, it's going to be delish. Also making it this time, I'm going to try out some of my ideas for using ribbon binding or just plain old bias tape to bind off the seams, the raw edges, wherever there are raw edges, before I complete the whole thing, for a more finished, tailored look where I don't have cut ends of warp yarn poking out of things. So, but as I said, first I'm going to do it as a sampler. And because I need 90 inches of woven fabric to make the origami jacket, which is just under 3 yards. I've got tons of left over to either make a sampler or to just have an additional length of yarn to do something with. I don't know what yet, but I'll do something with it. So to that end, I've pre-made myself uh, a register tape, a length measurement tape of 90 inches for the actual fabric. And then I made a shorter one measuring 51 inches. And in fact, I'm going to cut this down to about 40 inches just to make very, very sure that I don't run out. And you can see that I don't have excessively long tails on my warp ends because I'm not doing a fringe. So that's not going to be a problem either. The last thing I'm going to show you before I start weaving is what I've done with the treadles. And this is going to take a little maneuvering, so bear with me. So you may recall that I threaded my shafts in a straight draw, which means that on the shaft, everything goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then it just does it over and over and over again. So when I tied up the treadles, I tied up the two at the far right here that don't have numbers on them just for plain weave. So treadle number 1 is 1, 3, 5, and 7, and then the one next to it is 2, 4, 6, 8. The treadles with the numbers on them are set up for a plain old twill sequence. So a twill is just this amazing fabric structure where a weft end goes over a certain number of threads, and in this case, I think that I am doing a 2-2 twill. It goes over to under 2, over to under 2, but on the next pass, it advances one thread over, and that's how you get the lovely diagonal lines of twill. So the beauty of tying up like this means that if I take out one of my handy dandy pattern weaving books, and this time I'm using Carol Strickler's Weaver's Book of 8 Shaft Patterns, you can see that anytime I want, I can change the treadling pattern that I use as long as it matches the sequence that I originally tied these up in. And I can change the treadling and get a completely different cloth. Now, because there's a lot going on in this striped warp, I'm probably not going to go terribly crazy. I think that I'm going to be happiest because these colors are so bold and striking. I'm going to be happiest with just a plain old twill. If that's what I ultimately decide to do, I might just do it in plain weave. But I have this possibility. So this is one of the many ways you can choose to sample on the loom without having to rewarp the whole loom. So let's see how some of this actually plays out. Now that I've got my header woven, I can actually do some weaving. And when I do the real fabric, I am going to pull out my end delivery shuttle. But right now I've just got this bobbin on a boat shuttle just to use up the yarn. So without further ado, let's advance the warp a little bit and see where this takes us. Oh, and one of the other advantages to putting on a long-ish warp like this and trying out something new is that I can, and I'm going to try this because I've never done it before. I've seen my boss Jane Patrick do this. I can weave a section, a section with some length to it, maybe a yard long, and then I can, using hem stitching, hem stitch in my third apron rod that comes with any shack loom. And then I've got cut off fabric that I can wet finish so that I can see how this differential shrinkage might play out before I weave the whole length for my new origami cardigan. So when I reach that stage, because I'm going to have to do a little bit of research before and there, when I reach that stage, I will try and demonstrate for you. But for right now, I'm just going to do a plain old twill sequence. And remember that I've got a floating selvage going on. And remember that I've got yarns with different amounts of stretch. And my string heddles, my black string heddles, are not going to be necessarily as perfectly uniform as the metal ones. So I have to be a little bit careful of my shed. So as I start, I'm going over the floating selvage at the right and under the one at the left. Always go over the one you're starting at and under the one that you're not. And I'm just going to do my thing. So right now I am weaving the twill sequence. And it's very simple because it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because I've got my treadles all set up for that. And this floating selvage is not tight enough. So I might have to do a little finagling, because you want it to be, you want it to not give. And see how loose this is? This has got way too much give to it. So while I've still got my treadle up, I'm just gonna loosen this knot, and it helps to have a T-pin handy for loosening of knots. And if I can't tighten it, because remember, this is the stretchy yarn, this gray. If I can't tighten this enough at the front, I will just hang an S-hook off at the back, and that should solve my problem. Okay. There are different schools of thought about what to do with floating selvages, i.e. whether you wind them around the warp beam like the rest of your warp or not. And I always wind them with my warp, with the rest of my warp. But if you're getting the results you want, it doesn't really matter. So choose the method that works best for you, and off you go. So one of the cool things about weaving twills is just how much fun it is to watch the pattern progress and to see how noticeable the twill is. I'm doing a very, very light beat on this as I go. And with twills, you absolutely, positively, always, 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 unless you've got a really good reason not to, you want to do a floating selvage, because if you don't, just due to the treadling sequence and the arrangement of the threads, if you don't do a floating selvage, some picks don't go all the way to the selvage edge, and to me that's problematical. It is, you're going to get draw in, you're going to get just messy selvages, and who wants that, especially when you're trying to weave. When I get to the actual fabric for the origami cardigan, I know from long experience now that if I've got really good selvages on my length of fabric, I'm much happier with the finished garment. Just, it's like night and day. So I am going to switch to my end delivery shuttle down the road here when this one's empty, and we're going to see where that goes. Okay, so that's 2 sequences of the twill. And what I notice when I look really closely is the twill is perhaps obscuring a little bit too much of these alternating sequences, color sequences. So let's try some plain weave. And folks, this is all it takes to sample your loom. You have to go through all the steps of setting up your loom, but then you just go ahead and change what you did. And if you're really smart, and I might even be this smart, you take some notes about what you did in various patches of the sampler. Now, keep in mind, 2 repeats of the twill is not necessarily going to give me a whole lot of information. I'm going to want to come back and do some more, just to see if my first instinct is right. It's a little bit like knitting a swatch, that knitting a 1-inch swatch just does not give you enough information. Okay, and something is amiss here. It's not catching these end threads, and I'm not really sure why. I might have a threading error on these shafts. But again, sampling is something that helps you figure this out.